thank you, NASSCOM, for organizing this Straight Talk session with CXOs. We have a very exciting a set of panelists. We are going to just brainstorm on what's happening in terms of digital transformation. What are some of the big areas companies focused on in the last 9 months to move their business forward across insurance, retail, industrial, and other segments, and then look at what are they going to be focusing on in the next 12 to 18 months. What are some of the key digital priority areas for companies? And then more importantly, how are they going to execute on these digital priorities? Are they going to drive that internally? And how is the kind of culture they're going to build within the organization? How are they going to drive using open innovation as a theme, working with startups like many of you in the audience? And what are the mechanisms they're going to use to partner with these startups and so on? So both in terms a little bit on what happened in the last 8 months, looking at what's going to happen in the next 12, 18 months, and how are they going to deliver on some of the innovation internally as well as through partnership with startups. So we have super exciting speakers and have them introduced, but we have Deepu from Bajaj Allianz, we have Pratik from Reliance, we have Vijay Ratnapatke from Bosch, and we have Sarajit from Tata Steel, and Atul Jalan from Manthan. So you have 3 enterprise CXOs and 2 of the technology provider. Atul focused largely on retail, and Pratik from Reliance focused on across this enterprise technology capability for various industry segments. So we have a good diverse set of panelists. I'm really looking forward to chatting with them. Without further ado, if the NASSCOM team can bring the panelists onto the main stage, and we can get started.
Yeah.
Hi, Deepu. Welcome. Hi, Charjit.
Hi.
Yeah. Thanks, Pari.
Hi, Atul.
Hey, Pari.
Hi,
Good evening.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening. I think Vijay at Bosch is running between meetings, so he's going to join from Stuttgart using his phone. So let's see how that's going to work. And the NASSCOM team is going to let us know when he's going to be joining us, and then we'll bring them onto the main stage. So diving in, so first thing is, how are all of you?
Couldn't be better. Corona and all is as good as it gets. So
yeah,
it has been all good.
Yeah, it's very difficult to get people.
Yeah, thanks, Pari. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
It's very difficult to get all of you into a room. I think because we are doing it virtually, we're able to get all of you here. So it's some level, these virtual forms, I think it helps getting leaders from across together. So what I want to start with is really go around the table and talk about some of the experience over the last 9 months, right? And what are the things you kind of colored outside the boundaries? And that's why all of you are called corporate outlaws. So give us examples of digital transformation, which you did, which was not something in your plan. You do all of you do like exhaustive planning, getting into, and you'd have done a plan for 2020, but then everything's changed in March. And how did you react? What are the big initiatives you ran? What are some of the war stories? So that's really what I want to start with. Maybe Deepu, if you can start, and then we can go around and get some perspective.
Yeah. Thank you, Pari. Looking forward to a good discussion. Like you rightly said, COVID-19 was completely unprecedented. And the good thing is, we had always, invested in our digital journeys. And they really came to the fore, when COVID-19 was suddenly thrust on us. So we immediately, went about, communicating with our partners, customers, and of course, our own employees. And for us, the switch happened seamlessly without a single glitch. In fact, our customers were able to move to digital servicing virtually overnight. Like you see in those car and bike ads, right? 0 to 100 kilometers, in a matter of seconds. So even today, we have, customers coming in via digital assets, our AI-driven bot, WhatsApp, mobile app, and other digital assets. And the good thing, Pari, is a customer complaints during this period actually fell by 90%. That's a huge testament, the digital that we built. And coming to our employees, they were socially and physically distanced, but we had to keep them, digitally and emotionally connected. So we converted adversity into opportunity by moving from employee engagement to family engagement. So we did a weekend master chef. We got employee families to participate. Everybody was, floating recipes on WhatsApp, and then we announced winners, from family members. So that's how we kept our employees engaged. So for us, it's absolutely smooth ride, during the last 10 months.
And you mentioned that the customer complaints came down significantly. And why didn't you do this before? So what was like the organizational inertia you had? You were not able to do it without COVID.
Well, Pari, it's like this. We were ready, and as I said, we were just waiting for adoption. That standard WhatsApp joke, right? Who's responsible for digital transformation? Is it the CEO? Is it the head of digital transformation, or is it COVID-19? Right? And no prizes for guessing who. I guess everything came together. Everybody had to, get on the digital bandwagon. And if you see, it was global, it was industry agnostic, it was across all segments of society. And I think, that just helped, give a huge fillip to it. And the good thing is, the adoption is now here to stay.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Deepu. And I want to go into Pratik, and I'm pretty sure you're one of the key players in what was happening in Reliance at that time. The industry, it was a moment when the entire industry was so worried about what's going to happen to the economy, right? This is this 6-week period. Nobody knows what's going on. And then one day, Reliance started announcing these deals. Billions of dollars coming into India, billions of dollars, right? And you can see the entire business community, their optimism kind of going up, right? Every deal which happened, and we used to get a global CTO calls and say, hey, what is happening in India? Why is it suddenly there are billions of dollars going in? Am I missing something? And actually, how do I connect to Reliance? So it just changed, I think, and then brought in a whole lot of positivity to the industry, right? So tell us in terms of what was the journey like, what was happening, and how did it go about? Whatever you can share.
Thanks, Pari. And yes, I think it was indeed a proud moment for not just Jio, but for India, that in those times, India was able to pull that much of FDI. And I think that's a testimony not just to what we're trying to do here in Jio, but to the Indian economy. I think the robustness of the economy, the demographics of the economy are ripe for a digital transformation. I think this is the final bastion for a lot of industry players globally. If you look at China being a closed economy of sort, this is indeed the market to play in. And I think in the last 3 years, we've brought about significant change from 230 rupees per GB of pricing. We are now down to 3 rupees of GB pricing, and even lesser. So I think the average customer, I remember the industry used to call somebody who would use 1 GB of data in a month as an abuser. And now we are using on an average on a phone or a Jio dongle, we use average customer is using about 15 gig of data, and it's average consumption. So I think the ability to I think what India has witnessed in the last 3-4 years of transformation of digital adoption, I think that's what was the story that I think all the technology majors believed in, and I guess clearly the vehicle to bet on was Reliance Jio. So we are humbled by that, and we are now is the responsibility to make sure that all that confidence is translated into numbers and outputs, which are everyone's betted on. So, but I think from a pandemic perspective, and Deepu talked about it, I think the nimbleness with which many large companies overnight transformed their business model, their way to market, their way to deal with customers or employees. I think it's been a phenomenal change across industries we are observing. Even in-house, bulk of India actually recharges their mobile phone twice or thrice a month. And the retail shops were closed. So where do you go to do a physical recharge? And we created a digital model of recharge pretty much overnight and onboarded about a million franchisees who became overnight entrepreneurs. To help recharge at a local level. And the latest data that we saw is that 50% of the citizens of India today recharge digitally. They don't pay physical money at a store. So I think those changes and the immediacy with which we kind of made that happen, be it ensuring that the customers have the option to recharge. We were possibly the only telecom player who had call centers running without a blip throughout this journey. And mind you, it's a 6,000 people call center setup. It's not a small number. So to try to use the technologies that we sell to our customers, to use it in-house and make sure that every employee could work out of their home was another big change, so that customers could reach us at any point in time.
Yeah, it's amazing story. What you've been able to. I think it was a beacon of hope for the rest of the industry, and the rest of the industry kind of got on, and then we saw the kind of resilience and what we call as anti-fragility, right, in the industry over the last 6 months. It's an amazing story, and Prateek will come back to you. Then Atul, you sell to global retail, right, and all of them had Amazon kind of sitting on them, and this kind of made Amazon much larger, right? Trillions and trillions of dollars. Jeff Bezos is now, I think, the second richest person in the world, and they hired, I think, probably 1 million people. So the foundation they built in the last 20 years accelerated, quite a bit for Amazon. And now you work with all of these traditional retail companies. So what were you hearing from your customers during the start of the pandemic? Right? What are they worried about? How did you navigate and help them in the last 9 months?
Great questions, Pari. So look, we work, as you rightly said, we work globally with...
Welcome, Vijay. We'll come back to
you. Hey, Vijay. So we work globally with consumer-focused businesses, B2C businesses, largely retail, CPG brands, and restaurant chains. So what I think we all would agree quickly, what this pandemic has counterintuitively almost has shown us that it has, to my mind, it has put all underlying trends, technology trends, on a steroid. It has just accelerated those trends. My personal belief is about technology, few things, but in this context, that when a maturing technology kind of meets economic crisis, okay, it takes a very different kind of urgency. And that's what willy-nilly has happened here. I have been looking around, whether it's some of business model, technology adoption, which is at a level which I've never seen before. Somebody who's been science and technology all his life and has been a tech entrepreneur all his life, I have not seen that kind of focus, that kind of adoption. And I think necessity being the mother of all inventions. Talking about when pandemic started, whether a company like mine, we were bracing for, honestly, a degrowth and some kind of hit because we work with B2C businesses and they would be under pressure, under pump.
Yeah.
People are not going to go out to eat and shop and yada, yada, yada. I'm thankful to whoever that net we would be growing. And what has happened is, I think people somehow believe that a good crisis should not be laid to rest. Okay, and I think digital transformation has gone on hyperdrive. And that is what we are seeing. If you want me to speak now, or maybe later, I can talk about many examples of how people digital transformation, wherever they were, they are trying to move to the next level.
Give us one example of something happened in a customer side in the last few months, right? Which part did they accelerate and adopt?
Great. So look, one thing with perspective, life is becoming algorithmic. You and I are becoming algorithmic. Businesses are becoming algorithmic. Retail definitely is becoming algorithmic. Right from driving, hyper personalized experiences for customers, to using drone for last mile delivery, to using all kind of, you can think about all kind of AI, digitization technology, IoTs, image recognition, voice, voice ordering, and so on. They would find a sophistication application of all these technologies in this retailing environment today. Having said that, something top of my mind which comes is one of our customers, very big QSR chain, the leading QSR chain, basically leveraged our solution sets. So and US drive-through, through McDonald's and KFC has been a big scene because of contactless thing and so on. So wherever there was a permission from customer, just by reading the camera, reading the license plate, number plate, able to know who is driving in, then the predictive engine kicking in and basically telling customer, so is it going to be usual pari? Is it going to be ABC usual? By the way, this is what is an offer along with this. And before you said yes, no, basically triggering the backend order so there can be a quicker turnaround because they figured, again, through data analytics, the 98% time you're going to go for the usual. Okay. And so that is pleasing. I think self-checkout, because people are, look, robotics and automation we were already in the middle of it, heat of it. And something like this comes, you have a more motivation. You were removing people from the process for efficiency, for cost. Now you have a reason of health and safety as well. Okay, so
accelerated. So this is very consistent trends, Sadhu. Thanks, and we'll come back to you in terms of what the next 12 months look like. So Vijay, just quickly in terms of what we're talking about right now, just talk about what happened in the last 9 months, some war stories. Then we'll talk about the next 12, 18 months, and then how you go about doing it. So we had Deepu give a insurance perspective. We had Pratik give more Reliance perspective. Atul give more a retail perspective, and also want to hear from you from an automotive industry. An automotive industry already had big scandals, right? Volkswagen, the Dieselgate, and you have all of that, and you have this crazy entrepreneur, which company was almost like most short stock in the US. Now is the number one richest person in the world. You have these crazy entrepreneurs, and you have all of this already happening. And Absolutely. Then suddenly you had this, and people are not driving. They're sitting at home working. So how was it in the boardroom? Being in the boardroom, you were in Stuttgart, discussing with your customers, your own company. What was it like in navigating the last few months?
Yeah, thank you. So thank you all of you. Sorry for joining in late, but that was how my calendar could have been planned. So it's lunchtime. I skipped lunch just to tell you guys with only yes, and then I can join this. So thanks for this opportunity, Pari. So fundamentally, I used to always say this statement. If you have to imagine a war between transportation and communication, and now you have to really imagine, because I'm talking abstract. So in this war, if communication wins, then transportation needs to come down, because we need to transport ourselves, like myself, to this office. I'm in office right now, only to communicate most of the time. Unless we are talking of goods transport or we are saying sightseeing, we are most likely only communicating after transporting ourselves. And if that war is now, at this moment, I feel the war is being won by communication in a sense. And fundamentally, that what has affected the whole automotive industry. So I wouldn't talk so much of the scam, but there were two dimensions of automotive industry that has changed in the past year, 9 months, year, whatever you say. One is a structural change that the automotive industry is seeing. So we had overcapacity in the whole industry. The whole industry was gunning for something like 112 million vehicles a year. And what we realized fundamentally is that our number of vehicles a year was already peaked at 2018. And it's nowhere near 112. So overcapacity is one challenge. And the disruption that you talked about, which is, electric and and technology-led, which is autonomous and so on. So the moment electrification comes in, you have a smaller piece of the pie as a business itself, because it's easier to make an electric car. I'm not talking of the expensive battery, but in terms of the components that it takes. So the puzzle is smaller, the piece of the pie or the business pie is smaller, and on the top of that is the extra capacity that we had built in.
So Vijay, why are you saying that peak is already achieved? I mean, go down in India, people are still going in motorbikes, and if what a Reliance has done, bring down price dramatically, and will that not more people buy automotive, or it's really
not for the coming few years. So I'm saying when I said 112 numbers, 112 million cars, new cars in a year.
Okay.
So you're right. So if India is going to go up, something else is going to come down. So that's why the peak has already achieved for the coming few years. It's never for the next 100 years, for the coming decade, let's say.
Okay.
And therefore, the overall industry has a sort of a tapering down. Now, therefore, I heard you saying that all the industries, how they have digitized. Now, for instance, for us, it's actually slightly different. We have to look at how to save costs. It's a completely different, double whammy situation. One is because of the structural change, overcapacity, and so on, and the other one is because of pandemic. The communication aspect being winning than transportation aspect. People are not commuting. So if you're not commuting, you're not necessarily looking at buying cars. So industry has, come down drastically last year. This year, maybe it stabilizes, but we are seriously looking for saving money as a whole of automotive industry on one dimension. So what is digitization for us, if you will, is in the operations. So our ability to deliver, in fact, we had a peak of more than 100,000 meetings delivered virtually in a day. Bosch is a larger company, 400,000 employees, 160 countries, and so on. It's a very large company. So 100,000 meetings delivered virtually in a day is something that we could achieve. So it's the operational digitization that we looked at, while on the business standpoint, we had a setback for the reasons I mentioned, and therefore we are looking at saving money there.
Sure. And the digital, so how does digital transformation play a role as a CIO? One is in terms of optimizing and delivering all of this, right? What else did you focus on? Move it to cloud, or move into more digital channels of sales, automation in terms of process automation, industrial automation, and manufacturing. So what are some of those?
Yes, yeah, I can touch upon those. So see, for us, Bosch is not connected to the end consumers when automotive is concerned. So Bosch is, let's say, 60% automotive. The other one is 40% is 3 other divisions inside. So what actually helped us is, while automotive was going down, we call it a cocooning effect, because people stayed at home. They bought better refrigerators and better dishwashers and maybe better even the ovens or toasters and so on. And that's all made by Bosch again. So we had a boost in some of these sectors, while we had a lower, let's say, revenue coming in the automotive sector itself. But fundamentally, to answer your question on what has been then the digital transformation, so exactly the things that you pointed out. So Industry 4.0 or manufacturing IT, and this is, we call it manufacturing IT internally. So this is where host of investment internally is going in, or automation, or let's say we call it digitization of associates or employees. So employee as an experience to the employees, digitizing this experience is where the funding is going in. So it's all these aspects, but not the directly impacting a business like a consumer or something, because that's not, at least in the automotive sector, that's held by the OEMs and not by Bosch. So
anything on process, anything on delivering to it, how do you make it efficient, operations efficient, more on the employee side as well as your manufacturing side, IT,
logistics, manufacturing, employee, digitization of all of those fronts, which are extremely important. At the same time, IoT. So there's one maybe slightly different than what others may have talked. We are still focusing heavily on IoT because Bosch is a thing maker. We make up to 50 million things in a year. And if we were to see the data from these things being connected in the field, coming back into us. These are fundamental changes that we are bringing into Bosch. So there's a whole host of activities on IoT or even AIoT, so artificial intelligence led Internet of Things. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on there. But if you look at how do I prioritize, so the priority clearly today is on what saves money first. Is going, even if it's digitization, it's more towards saving money when it comes to automotive, more towards customer experience when it comes to the household appliances and so on.
Got it. So even if a new initiative, you have to get the money from somewhere and invest. And we'll come to that in terms of where you're going to get the money. And thanks, Vijay. Sarojit, last but not the least, I mean, we're one of the largest companies in India. What happened to the steel industry in the start of the pandemic? You know, what are the boardroom war stories?
Thanks, Pari. Thanks, everyone, for having me. I don't know the boardroom stories, but I share the Trencher story.
Yeah.
Largely, if you see the steel industry, there were three things that happened. One, steel is a continuous process industry. Like Prateek moves more data, we move as an industry more material than anyone else. Tata Steel is about 4% of Indian Railways revenue, which is one of the largest railway networks, and so on and so forth for our competitors, right? So together we would be 15-16% of all freight that is being transported. For every unit of steel that we ship out, we have 6 units of coal and iron ore and limestone and all the sorts of things which are coming in, and 4 units of things that we have to put somewhere, and 1 unit of gases that we need to manage. So given that large complex chain, and bear in mind that you suddenly had, I was never planned for a scenario where you had 0 orders. We had shrunk to 0.5% of our order book.
0.5%?
Yeah, and in the month of April, that was the country was in lockdown. Now, bear in mind that unlike other industries where you can at least shut it down, Bosch can at least stop the production line. If I stop the production line, I have iron at 1565 degrees centigrade in a blast furnace, just cut off the oxygen. And how does Praxair give me oxygen? Because they are shut down. You shut off the oxygen, what you have inside is molten iron that's solidified. So you can't distinguish it from the blast furnace anymore, and so on and so forth. So first thing we did as an industry, I think credit to all the compatriots in the industry, we made sure we worked with the government to keep the supply chain working. Second thing that we did so that all the industries which are upstream are kept running. Second we did is we had a lot of, we suddenly saw that China was buying. So in no time, the entire industry and everybody was kind of fighting with China. We were busy selling to China and earning revenue for the country and keeping ourselves alive as an industry.
Okay.
Third thing that Tata Steel primarily did is suddenly we couldn't go to office. So we went to anytime, any place compute, and we are still on it. Everybody in the company, all the white collar staff are currently into 2 modes, absolute work from home. So I am proud to say that for the next 1 year, I'm on absolute work from home. I don't have an office. Whatever you see right now is my office.
Okay.
I'm a manufacturing company. I can see my entire company from my laptop if I wanted to. So we have read capability on everything in the company. And the other thing that we kind of other thing that is there are people who are kind of flexible work from work, which means they have to be in the location that they are in. So I think the companies right now, I don't know, IT I know is about 70% absolute work from home and 30% flexible work from home. You still have to lay some wires and you have to have the routers and the switches working. And when say Prateek sends somebody saying you need to host a tower here, you need to have the remote LAN and WAN and everything set up, right of passage, etc. So that's one part of what happened. And I think in terms of where we are going from here, and of course we had to keep the town running. So we have a 1,000-bedded hospital, which set up COVID wards. We took stadiums and set up COVID wards. What particularly one thing that we did, which we are very proud of and something that we've not seen anywhere else, is we had put up 19,000 beacons across some of the most remote locations in the country, which were beaconing at 400 milliseconds. And we had all these 75,000 Suraksha cards, as we called, which were distributed to all the workers. And so at any point of time, within about a second, we have probably set up one of the largest internet of human beings. So I know exactly where the workers are, how they are, Are they managing social distances? If they are not, alerts go out. I have cameras saying, are people making face masks or not? We've got our canteens getting booked. So the entire company is like one large digital highway on which all of us can plug in and plug out.
And what was the employees' willingness to adopt some of these technology, especially the blue-collar workers who are working in the factory? How would you face resistance, or how was that for them to adopt some of these technology? Like reserving a canteen seat before they go. That's a huge change in behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see ourselves as a 113-year-old startup. We have had the benefit of seeing the last pandemic. Not many companies have had the benefit of seeing the last pandemic, if you can call it a benefit.
I think
Bosch probably, yes. And one of the things that we found was that with lot less resources at that time, the Jamshedpur was one of the lowest fatality rates anywhere in the world, while India had the highest fatality rate.
Interesting.
And we took communication from that side, and it says all the same thing: do social distancing, get yourself tested. If you are coming in, don't infect the others. And these were all actually Englishmen writing and very senior Indians implementing. And so we literally had a playbook, and with all the technology at our disposal, I wouldn't say it was not easy, but it was pretty simple. Saying, look, I mean, guys, they did it then. If we can't do it now, not shame on us, but certainly we're not living up to the standards they've set. And the union and the workers have always been extremely supportive, because one of the things that we have always done is we have communicated and taken them on board. I think if you want to run far, run together. If you want to run fast, then run alone. And we've always, running far is in our DNA. That's been the tone from the top.
Super. Thanks, Ajit. I think it's a good view in terms of what had happened in the last 9 months to 12 months. Getting into what are some of the things we're expecting. I'll start with the enterprises, and then come into the two technology providers here. Right, Deepu, if you can give us a view, what are the trends driving the insurance industry, especially in India? What do you see on digital trends in the next 12, 18 months? What are these practical things you're going to drive, implement in the next 18 months in your roadmap?
I think it's a good question, Pari. You're basically asking me to do crystal ball gazing, when all the crystal ball gazing in, at the end of 2019, came to naught, right? Thanks to COVID-19. So hopefully there is no black swan event, which comes and proves me wrong. Having said that, if you look at the entire landscape, Pari, let's first look at product. The biggest form of insurance is motor insurance, and that's because it's mandated by law.
Sure.
And if you look at the history of insurance, the biggest form of insurance in the 1600s, when insurance first came into existence, was marine insurance, because at that time the major form of transport, and I like the way Vijay put it, right, communication business transport, was were ships. Then when the automobile revolution happened, man began to transport using vehicles, so which is when the biggest form morphed from marine to motor insurance.
Yeah.
And now with everything becoming digital, we do expect cyber insurance, to be the new frontier. So I think that's one thing, clearly, which you're going to see in insurance. The second thing which, COVID has made us wary of, Pari, and you spoke about the fact that, we all are able to talk today because, we are all, distanced digitally, is that people have, become touch-free, from a UI UX perspective. So we expect, the UI UX landscape, to be touch-free. Then nobody wants to press, the button in the elevator or the key in the ATM, right?
Sure.
So from that context, Pari, I see voice coming into play in a big way.
Okay.
We, for example, had integrated our bot with Alexa and Google Assistant. And even if you look at research, voice-based search on Google is increasing by a whopping 270% year on year. So I see voice, coming into play in a big way, across the entire spectrum. So I see these three trends, cyber insurance, voice, and, touchless, UI UX.
Okay.
And the fourth thing, coming from a digital perspective, Pari, is we see increasing self-service, at every point in the value chain. So whether it is claims, today you don't have to, wait for a surveyor. You can click photographs and upload them using the mobile app. Okay. And we give you the money, in about 20 to 30 minutes. It's live. I'm talking about something which is live. Similarly, if you have to, buy policies, you can just go to the web, or you can just use the app and, buy policies. So I see self-service coming into existence at every step of the value chain. So I'll basically pick, these 4-5 trends, as key areas, in the coming year.
Got it. And then what are you implementing? Like, if you go ahead and drive that, are you staging it? Because first, cyber insurance is more a new product category, and other ones are more improving customer experience and efficiency, newer channels, and so on. So where are you kind of spending time on? If you take that in 100% of time, which of the trend are you spending more time on?
So, Pari, firstly, I'll answer your question in two parts. One is that all of these, obviously, we have already spent our time. That is the reason I'm talking about, because we're already into 2021, right? So, we are very much into it. And if you ask me, which are the areas which are consuming maximum time, I'll basically pick two out of these. One is touchless UI UX, because that's, clearly coming in as a defining, trend through all our transactions.
Sure.
And the other is, about, self-service coming into play at every step of the value chain. I think these two are consuming a lot of our bandwidth nowadays.
Got it. And then in terms of technology usage, are you building these on public cloud platforms, or are you building your own data center and platform, or are you buying it? So how do you think about technology?
Yeah. So Pari, we were pioneers, in terms of being one of the largest carriers in insurance to simultaneously transform our core platform as well as, host it on the cloud. So we right now follow a hybrid model, which is, an on-prem model as well as, the cloud model. I guess, the benefits of cloud are far too obvious for me to, restate them, especially to a distinguished audience like this, right? The least of which are basically avoiding obsolescence of hardware and ensuring that, since data is now at the center of everything that we do, we moved from, isolated data marts to a single data lake. And I think that's really helped us leverage data, not only from the point of view of, let's say, cross-sell or upsell, which is what typically you would focus on,
sure,
but also from using data to give, for example, much better servicing. You can give location-based service. So I think clearly that's in play right now.
Super. Thanks, Deepa, and I'll get back to you. And Vijay, from your perspective, you mentioned cost is the number one thing you're optimizing for. Is it going to continue into the next 18 months? If you look at the next 18 months of roadmap of your time, where are you going to be, you and your team, where are you going to be focusing on?
Yeah, so cost is not the only dimension. So cost has become the major dimension, but of course we have to save somewhere to invest somewhere.
Yeah.
And when I was saying cost, I was saying IT and not the business. But in business, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. So if you take automotive business, which is large part of Bosch, we have on the technology side I will try to make it simpler for the panel and the audience to understand. Is basically we are bringing in computers, microprocessors in the car, then microcontrollers. So microcontrollers manage to. So if you imagine car as let's say several microcontrollers bringing in signals and data in the car, sort of the engine deciding on what it needs to do further.
Yeah.
I'm not saying autonomous car, it's a standard car, including any standard car, because it needs to take good decisions on fuel efficiency and so on. You replace that with a different architecture that's coming in with microprocessors coming in. And this is going to make a huge change on how the car architecture would be drawn. So in a sense, you can imagine a central huge computer and the tentacles only for sensors on different parameters to bring it in. So you have a possibility to execute a task on different sets of computers going forward. So the architecture changes fundamentally.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So software comes in heavily into the car, which was not the case until now. And here is the time where it starts to switch. This is one dimension. On the dimension of bringing in hydrogen, I think many countries are seriously thinking for large loads like trucks and buses and so on. Electrification may not be a viable option, and therefore hydrogen-based fuel cell.
Okay.
That part of the technology, even that is, I see that being betted on as we go along. So there are multiple dimensions of technology in the business, in the automotive world. But when we think of my world, let's say as a CIO or the IT world, we are precisely looking at, I think what you had asked earlier. So how do we bring our applications to cloud? How do we containerize them? How do we leverage internal cloud, which is enterprise hosted cloud, versus the hyperscalers? How do we balance the load between these two and various aspects related to bringing the newer technology into the IT world, and thereby bringing down cost, of course.
And what about the whole connector? If you look at upgrades, like you talk about Tesla, they talk about you park the car in the night, the next day even an update to the powertrain has been pushed through OTT. and the car looks but drives differently, and that's something they're able to do because they're not working with the tier one, right? They're directly driving a lot of these technology themselves. So is it changing in terms of the structure of the industry, what an OEM does, what a tier one does, what a tier two does? Is there some kind of a shift, structural shift we can expect in automotive?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. So if you can imagine the likes of Uber or Ola to take the lead, I mean, I know with pandemic, maybe it has a little bit of a setback, but let's say the aggregators, if they were to lead, then the aggregator will order cars on a Mahindra or Tata or a BMW, right? Please make 200 cars for us, 200,000 cars for us. So that becomes the tier one. And then on top of that, a government or a policymaker can somehow become a tier one. If you are in, Kempegowda Stadium cricket match going on, IPL in the evening, you don't want all the aggregators to have their vehicles coming in. So you make policies. So policies will determine where the buses will run or which cars will run, which aggregators will run. I don't want to say which cars, but basically that becomes then tier zero. So there is a potential to fundamentally change this. Yes, agreed. So policymakers, aggregators, and then OEMs. If that's the food chain we get into, then somebody like Bosch, which is already a tier one, becomes a tier 3 or tier 4, depending on how we call it. And then the fundamental starts to change. So if the vehicle is autonomous, you are not looking at the experience of what happens when you push the pedal. Today, you are excited to drive a BMW because the experience of pushing the pedal, you have that with you.
Yeah.
When it's anyway autonomous, how do you care what is getting driven? So some of these things will start to change, but I would say those are little longer run and not in the immediate future.
Got it. And thanks, Vijay. And Sarojit, how is that in the steel industry? You've been around for hundreds of years, and what you manufacture is still steel. And Clayton Christensen had talked about, the mini mills coming in and that disrupting. That's like 30 years ago. I'm not sure what are the big innovation happened, and more importantly, what are the next 18 months look like for you from a digital solution perspective?
So I think for us, we are acutely seeing the ACES disruption, for example, which Vijay talked about, like it's autonomous, connected, electric, and sharing. And sharing may have taken a beating, but most of the trends, as Atul was talking, has gone on steroids. Sharing is the only kind of a trend that's out of all the trends which we came in with. So we were running, for us in a steel industry, the cost curve is very, very important. You need to have the lowest cost structure. And come what may, everything else will be inflating. If you have the lowest cost structure, you'll be the last man standing. The way we are seeing, in order to have the lowest cost structure, we are looking at the company as 6 connected dots. So there is a connected worker, where you're looking at productivity, you're looking at build, acquire, and rent talent in the right fashion. You're looking at training. Then we have the connected processes, where you're looking at process excellence, making those processes agile, making sure they're interconnected, etc. Then we have the connected assets. So we are obviously a large assets, and you're looking at the yield, energy, throughput, quality, and productivity of these assets, so that you are the best harvester. Then we have the connected customer, and this is the area where we have gone very ahead with our platformatization strategy. Just to give you a sense, in the last this year, we would probably end up selling 650 crores worth of steel on the net, just to take, what we were saying. And it's almost like saying it happened in India, right?
So you sell on like Alibaba platform, or you sell directly to the consumers?
We are selling directly to the customers, but the innovation we have done is we have not undermined the channel, because you need the fulfillment. So we are, we are now reaching on to pin codes which we would never have reached. And at a cost structure that we would never have had. And fortunately for us, we are not pumping in money into these platforms. These platforms are generating, some of the people were joking that one day Ashiana as a platform would be more valuable than Tata Steel as a company. We have 100,000 footfalls, good conversion rates, and it's profitable for day one. So this is telling us that the world is going to be fragmented between 2 kinds of markets. There is a market like Ashiana, which is a vertical market, where you're connecting tomorrow's aspirations. People need shelter and design to tomorrow's capabilities by bringing in the ecosystem together. And then there will always be horizontal markets like Amazon, which are connecting demand to inventory and doing a fantastic job of it. And how well you run these vertical versus horizontal markets is going to be the question of, and is going to be an interplay. We have then a node called connected transactions, where under one Tata operating network, we've aggregated all our transactions and we are just putting it to TCS, who are much better placed to do it. And doing two things: one, cementing our cost forever, and then looking at synergies of technology that come in. And last is what we call connected decisions, which is the one super node that runs across these 5 nodes, which is where we have an integrated margin management, where we can go away from the local optima, which is historically what has kept it at low cost, and start moving into global optima, using the 3 levers of what we call digital twins in the plants, feeding into material allocators so that the right material is going to each of these different plants, feeding into sourcing allocators, which will ensure that we optimize for the sourcing.
So all of these are automated, or it's more human enabled?
Yeah, these are we got 3-4 main programs. So there's a visualization program, so that what happened and what might happen is driven by what we call citizen data scientists. We don't want them to come to the IT department.
Sure.
So that's about 25-30% of the company. I'm hoping in the next 2 years we'll put that number up to about 75-80%, where at that time that will become more or less autonomous. We have simulation, where we are in very early stages of making these digital twins. That's not a technology, and like Deepu was saying, it's the AR, VR, and a lot of what if that can come in. We have prediction, where we are running about 120, 130, now going up to about 200 models, which are primarily ML and a bit of AI, but a lot of ML, where we are a lighthouse identity globally. There's a lot talked about. And last but not the least, then we have the stochastic optimization, where we have a platform called AIMS, where we are bringing all the data. These nodes are pretty strong in themselves. But the value lies in connecting between the nodes. And that's really a journey that, so in our 3-part journey, just to conclude, we have the cloud journey. So we have become multi-cloud. 85% of our loads are in the cloud. The balance 15% is the intelligent edge that we are working on. The next part of the journey is data. So we are trying to measure 2 simple KPIs. What is the unit of value that we are delivering per unit of data? And what is the cost that we are incurring per unit of data? We're not there yet, but we are trying to set these 2 very simple KPIs and benchmarks. And the third part, of course, will be the AI journey, which will drive over the data. But without the data journey complete, and without connectivity coming into India, for example, just to take 1 more minute and then conclude, we have, our competitors like POSCO, which has made a dark plant. So dark plant, because it's a light off plant. Sure. You don't need anybody if there are nobody in the plant, right? Yeah. We would take probably 500 to, even Baushan Steel probably would take 500 people. I can't speak for them, but my guess would be they'll take 500 people. But where Baushan Steel really leads the world, and it's amazing, is that they are able to run a blast furnace from 3,300 kilometers away. Wow. We have read capability onto the blast furnaces. We can see our blast furnaces from anywhere in the world or the planet or even outside, but we can't write back into it. And that is where we will rely on Prateek's getting us the IoT into the 5G, 6G campuses, into the blockchain, which we are also working with some of our competitors, because we need to secure the industry as a whole and also measure carbons across. Over to you.
So Sarajit, you have a lot of asks for Prateek, so let's hear from him. So Prateek, what is the focus in the next 12, 18 months? What are your customers asking you? I think Sarajit had already a lot of requests for you, but what are you hearing? You are mute, I think.
I've already heard my customers speak, so that's pretty much what we are working on. But I think one thing, and Deepu alluded to that, there were 3 sets of customers: the cloud enthusiast, the cloud fence-sitter, and the cloud naysayer.
Okay.
Now that has kind of pretty much gone, because only the degree of adoption is different, but everybody's moving on to the cloud. And I think that's going to be fundamental to scaling any business, to making it, making sure that no other black swan event impacts it. It is liquid in terms of scale, and it also makes sure that you're not dependent on one individual who, because of his presence or absence, can impact a business operation. So I think cloud journey clearly is significant, and we are seeing that. The second is again, Deepu said touch-free, right? And I think that touch-free is manifesting itself in the form of creating a digital identity. And for large enterprise, it is sophisticating the digital identity they already had. Maybe will put a bot to interact with the customer. But for a vast majority of SMBs, that is truly democratizing the technology and giving them a face. Because if people are not walking the street, how will they discover? And that discoverability, that going online, starting an e-commerce platform pretty much in flat 5 minutes, those are the needs of the hour of the SMB. How can they adopt the technology that, I mean, if we would need a Sarajit to kind of implement the technologies in a small medium business of 40 people,
they can't afford it.
Exactly. And how do you kind of get a virtual CIO, a virtual CDO, and can you play that role for small medium businesses? I think that's going to be the key aspect as small medium businesses adopt technology, adopt digital.
So one other question I had, of just adding on to what you said, right? There is a perception that the Indian enterprises are kind of lagging behind the global enterprises in terms of digital adoption. But if you look at the consumer side, what has changed in the last 9 months, right? We can use QR code, you can use UPI, you can transact. I mean, you go to the US, you go to Europe, you actually pay in cash in restaurants in Germany. And it just so, we are so farther ahead on those areas, eKYC, and now the whole vaccine platform, which is government is launching and delivering, it's centralized. I don't even see the US had that sophisticated system, which is all linked to Aadhaar and so on. Seems on the consumer side, the world is kind of realizing the digital infrastructure India has built, it's world class, and in other countries are wanting to follow. But what do you see in the SMB and enterprise side? Are we lagging behind? Or are you seeing that Indian enterprise are catching up or leading?
No, I think while India, if you were to look at ICT consumption as a percentage of GDP, India was a notch significant below US or Western economies. But I think I'm waiting for Zinnov to publish data post-COVID. I'm waiting to see the other research groups talk about it. I think there's a significant jump that has happened. It was also about not just affordability. Yes, affordability is one aspect, but it's also comfort. And I think that's what we are trying to address in Jio, is to say, how do we solve the affordability problem? And if the company cannot afford a Sarojit Jha, how do I demystify technology? Because if you're thrown with plethora of products and services and solutions, which is the best thing for me, is I think the next big question that, so now everybody knows digital has to be adopted, but which is the right solution to go to? And that is, I think, going to be a fundamental problem, which is what we want to take to our slightly smaller businesses who cannot afford a chief digital officer or a CIO, or probably don't even have an IT department. The third, I think, attended issue will be that if everything goes digital, security will become absolute critical area. And that's, I think, what people are looking at. When 9 months back, when there was no option but to move employees to home and get the work done from home, the companies adopted that. But there are companies that we are hearing from saying that, I have this employee who's my call center executive. I have no governance on him. I don't know whether he's taking a parallel job.
Yeah,
he's working with somebody else. So there are, now that the hump is over, people have crossed over, people are realizing productivity gains as well, but they have other aspects of how do I manage employees? How do I make sure that he's productive? And more importantly, I think the mental health of employees is becoming a critical aspect. So we heard about employee engagement to family engagement, but I think that the tools to deploy these are going to be yet again important, and customers are asking us for that, saying that, do you have a technology solution for a business problem? And I think that's what we would see, a significant move to cloud, making sure that nobody today writes your physical address, but you're writing your Instagram handle or a LinkedIn handle. That's what businesses are looking for. What is their address on the web? And I think that's going to take a huge jump. And just a data point, before COVID, there were about 1 million domains registered in India.
Yeah.
And that number in China is about 12 million unique domains. I think that number is significantly changing.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of just points out to the fact that everybody is going and putting their address on the web and then transacting on the web.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a significant change. I think hopefully our enterprises, Indian enterprises, kind of lead in terms of technology adoption.
Yeah, and I think why if the question, and we've often asked that question, is if COVID had happened 15 years back, would communication industry been able to manage that?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is a big no. And I think it's the ubiquitousness of a 4G network, a fiber network that today all of us are having a blip-free session. And I think the requirements of absolutely the requirements of digital twins, requirement of automation, data lakes will demand more and more resilience and more fatter capable pipes, lower latency pipes. And that's what we're working on. While I talked about the digital solutions, I think underpinning all of this is the connectivity infrastructure, which is what would be required to do any of these.
Yeah. I think 5G coming in, and that's going to really make it much faster. So diving into Atul, and one of the things which happened is, I'm pretty sure you were on the plane all the time, like most of us, right? Traveling, meeting customers before COVID, and you were one of the early successful enterprise software company in India who were building for global markets, deeply understanding global retail companies. Suddenly from March, you're not able to travel and you have to sit at home and sell to the Fortune 100 retail companies. What did you have to change both in terms of mindset and behavior and all of that? And I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs are listening to it, budding entrepreneurs. They're allowed to hear from you on what did you change?
Before I respond to this, I have to thank everyone here. I've learned such a bunch, from computers on wheels to playbook from 1970. And I keep talking about cybersecurity and risk of cybersecurity and so on, but cyber insurance didn't occur to me. Makes sense. Well done, Deepu. So coming to COVID thing, yes, I travel almost 18, 20 days of a month. So at a personal level, I have a mixed feeling. Sometimes I'm not complaining. I'm just kind of catching breath yet. From a business point of view, look, necessity being the mother of all invention, as we discussed, this has helped us to realize that we can sell remotely. Okay, I will not be able to take the names.
Yeah.
Our sales velocity has not dipped. Our pipeline is as good as it was pre-COVID. We have been able to top of the funnel custom pipeline conversions. What has been most heartening to me is that we have been pushing for, when we started as a classical software company, 2014-15, much like everybody else, we to realize that the future of how software would be bought, sold, used, consumed, benefited would be through cloud SaaS paradigm. And we moved lock, stock, barrel towards cloud SaaS paradigm. My belief has been it is not only a commercial model that you're not paying me one time, but more rental kind of thing. It's a different paradigm. Okay. And that also means that my software has to reach an appliance state. It doesn't have to have an implementation, heavy duty implementation. It should have reached an appliance state. I bring a toaster, I plug the damn thing, expect it to work. So we have been running an initiative called Switch On. Okay. And the vision is that very complex enterprise applications that we develop and implement. When we started Manthan, it was around 6-7 months. Today, we have brought it to 6-7 weeks. During pandemic, two things happened. A, we have done some very complex implementations, totally remotely, virtually.
Okay.
And 80 to 85% of them, that process has been automated. So that has brought that 6-7 weeks to 6, 7, 8 weeks to 2, 3, 4 weeks now. And we are so encouraged by the results that I think we can get down to 2 hours, which has a very serious benefit on business scale and so on and so forth, right?
Got it. And a lot of the travel you think if you're doing for more personal benefit and adventure rather than actual business.
Those are the ones I'm missing. I must say I'm not missing the business ones.
Super. And Vijay, a lot of what is going to be done, are you going to do this internally? Are you going to partner with startups? So if you're looking to partner with startups, what are you thinking about? And how entrepreneurs listening, how do they partner with Bosch in your next 18-month roadmap?
Yeah, so there are two dimensions. So I will take what's the relevant dimension for the audience here from India. Essentially is to connect with Robert Bosch Engineering and Business Solutions in Bangalore, because this is the engineering firm. It's very large. So after Germany, that's the biggest development that happens. So if we talk of autonomous vehicles, there's a whole lot of stuff that gets developed in Bangalore. If you're talking of the, as I said, the architecture changing in the car, there's a whole lot of software gets built in Bangalore. So everywhere Bangalore, this unit of Bangalore, Robert Bosch Engineering and Business Solutions, connects very well to the ecosystem there, the startup ecosystem there, and the startups could therefore connect for an augmented reality based solutions, or as was talked about, the digital twin. Bosch is working on, all these technologies, AIoT, IoT, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all of this stuff is getting leveraged for either manufacturing, logistics, employees on one side, the operations, or on the other side, it's exactly getting into the car, into the refrigerator, into the washing machines. So it's actually technology is getting inside those products and connecting those products versus also in the operation. So whole host of possibilities exist for connecting to this unit, and they are actually connected, because that was my previous job. So this unit is always connected to NASSCOM Startup Center, and you are aware of.
Got it. So Bosch, Robert Bosch, Bangalore would be the right person. They are working with the NASSCOM 10K program. So
yes,
through NASSCOM, they'll be able to reach out to some of the Bosch. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you said 2 ways.
Yeah. So this is the other one is basically Bosch does invest into. So Bosch has Robert Bosch Venture Capital as a separate company.
Okay.
And this
have you made investments in Indian startups already, or you're not made investments in Indian startups?
Indian startups, I tried chasing when I was in the role in India. I tried chasing several times, and there were very good reasons why. Somehow our startups are, it seems, working towards more applications than creating technology. This was the view from the venture capital chief, versus they is looking at creation of technology. And
you're looking for more deep tech startups rather than more application startups.
Yes, and we do have deep tech now. So now the current head of RBEI in India needs to push the Robert Bosch Venture Capital once again to come to India. But in this push, we managed to succeed them to look at China. So at least one step happened. Otherwise, it was
the wrong direction you're pushing them.
As a part of my current job, it has nothing to do with it. But yes, I get your point.
Super. And Pratik, if you want to buy, if startup want to be acquired by Reliance, I know Nowflow was acquired, and I'm pretty sure you've done a few more. What are you looking for, and how should they reach out? Or to partner?
We've done a series of acquisitions, and it's not as much for the customer base, but the intellectual property they bring in, be it Nowflow for digital discovery, Haptik in natural language processing, and conversational AI. We've acquired Find, for which has products for the logistics and retail industry. So we've had investment in a drone company out of Bangalore. So Imbibe, the education for focusing on education. So we run a separate Geo Gen Next program as well for supporting, mentoring, incubating startups, and that's program that has seen 200 plus companies go through that kind of mentoring, incubating sessions. But our strategy team is very active in kind of scouting for it, and anybody can, any startup here can just write to me, and I'll make sure that we give a good look at what you bring to the table. For us, customers are not what we're looking for. It's about, as we just said, deep understanding, capability in a particular technology, in a particular domain. That's what we're looking for, and we will use these fabric, if you will, to kind of either groom them for their own standalone businesses, but also to integrate that technology for the rest of the Reliance group, and also use that technology and use the Reliance and the Jio strength to kind of make sure that these startups get a place to operate, which is global. One of the things that I was looking at is 95 to 98% of startups don't have a customer base beyond 5,000. That's one very interesting statistic that very rarely, I mean, and we're obviously not talking of the unicorns, but the otherwise the startups tend to have, and the biggest problem is customer acquisition. So I think we bring that, if we believe that that's a technology that a lot of people are looking for, that adds to our own technology strength. We're definitely interested in startups, and it's irrespective of whether they're in the B2C world or the B2B world, they're in the application space or they're in the deep technology space.
Got it. Super. So we look forward to you being very active in the space going forward. Sarojit, what about you? How are you looking to partner with startups? I'm pretty sure you wouldn't acquire startup, but other ways to partner with startups, or you're even acquiring startups?
So we have a digital startup engagement program. It's not lived up to its billing as of yet, but we have scouted for about 400 startups. We are working with about 18 of them, but you're right. Our primary focus is to provide them digital domain data and guidance and mentorship to create products that they can scale from there.
Are you buying this technology? If you look at, say, $100 in IT spend you're doing, like with Microsoft and other large companies, how much of that will go into startups right now? Like how many $100 of technology you buy?
Yeah, but I think we are not buying, we're making technology really around AI and data. For example, where we are really inviting startups is, to give you an example, we have a concept called fourth party data. So you have an organization like ISRO, which needs to simulate hydro jets at 5 Mach 5, and we have RHD gases, which are 16 of them which are running. There are 700, 800 variables that can be simulated. So ISRO is not going to run them every day. I'm just taking a name. So a startup can actually come, create with us those models and go and sell it to ISRO. We are happy to look at a data marketplace.
It's not like you are buying the technology from startup, but you're collaborating with startup, co-innovating.
So we buy technology as well. But what we have stopped is, we have said no pilot purgatory. So right in the beginning of buying a technology, we will say you demonstrate the technology for 3 months.
Okay.
And wherever it is being implemented will be a scaled implementation. Otherwise, poor startups meet startup dies. And now we're very, very conscious that that's not what we are going to allow to happen. So like Prateek, if you wanting to reaching out to me, you can reach out to me and we'll put you on to the right guys. But at the same time, we're really looking at creation of technology rather than application support, where you can, with all due respect to anyone, it's difficult to compete with the scale and the delivery and the global governance of, say, a TCS or, the likes of them.
Got it. Thanks, Ajit. Deepu, what about you? If you take $100 of technology buy, how much do you buy from startups?
So, Pari, firstly, transparently sharing with you, we don't measure, a spend like that.
Okay.
And it will be very difficult, put a number to it. But I'll give you a more comprehensive answer to your query, around how do we work with startups. Now, what we do, Pari, is, if you look at it like a pizza, which is broken into slices. Let's say at every slice, you ask yourself, do I make it or do I buy? So if it makes sense for us to make it in-house, we obviously make it in-house. And if it makes sense for us to, take it from the market, we do work with startups. In fact, across the entire spectrum, we have worked with, quite a few startups. If you look at our AI-driven chatbot, we have worked with a very successful startup in India. If you look at our IoT products, we have worked with, 2 startups. And even if you look at our blockchain-driven claim settlement, which we launched, 3.5 years back, we worked with a startup. So we do leverage, the unique value proposition that, startups bring in at various parts of the value chain. And then, we get into a co-creation model, because we share our experience, they bring in their expertise, and then, we go to market.
Okay.
For them, it makes sense because we are a marquee name and they're able to scale up. So it becomes a win-win both ways.
Got it. Thanks, Deepo. And Atul, are you looking to buy some companies?
So we just made an acquisition a year back of a very large size company from our perspective and proportion, based in San Francisco, Rich Relevance.
Okay.
And our current positioning is of an AI platform, which kind of enables different kind of use cases, some that we already do, some that we plan to do in coming future. So we are looking at a couple more. We do work with startups as well. As I said, today we are a very solid AI platform, and anything that accelerates our roadmap, we're always looking for partnership, either through an OEM partnership or potentially acquisition. I think from our point of view, there is just 2-3 years of window where you either emerge as a global market leader or end as in the column of also ran.
I think our time is up, and maybe we've lost Pari, the host himself. So I would like to thank all of you for being on the panel with me. This was my first try from Germany using a cell phone. So I've logged in from cell phone. I can hardly see things because I have to sit back a little bit. So thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you, everyone, and we're wishing you all a great 2021, and hope to see you guys again. Cheers from my side.
Thanks, everyone. Wonderful interacting with all of you. And like you said, Prateek and Vijay, and of course, Atul and Sarajit, great interacting with all of you. Have a wonderful 2021. And, we should connect, whether digitally or physically, time will tell, but we should connect.
Absolutely. Inshallah. Great talking to you guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.